He threw me out in the rain when I was 7 months pregnant. Not after a long fight. Not after a final warning. He laughed and the neighbors watched like it was a show. If it were you, what would you have done? My name is Lena, and I'm going to tell you this. The way I'd tell a friend on a long midnight drive window. Cracked thunder rolling somewhere you can't see, but you can feel. Because that's how this night lived in my chest. Like weather I carried around. I'm not going to dress it up. I'm not going to make it prettier than it was. And yeah, I'm going to ask you questions. You might not want to answer, because that's how I survived, by telling the truth and asking for yours. It started with a clock that wouldn't shut up tick-tick in the kitchen, like it was proud of keeping time, while everything else fell apart. Rain tapping the glass, a cheap pot of rice going cold on the stove, the chicken dry because I'd reheated it twice, and my hands resting on my belly, tracing little circles, the way my mom used to do when I had a fever. Ethan was late again. His phone had gone straight to voicemail for hours, and that phrase is its own kind of lie, you know what I mean. Straight to voicemail doesn't mean dead battery. It means silence on purpose. He pulled up like he owned the night, slammed the car door hard enough that our porch light trembled arched in. Tossed his jacket so it skidded across the floor, and he wouldn't look at me. That was our tell, always had been the eyes. The little grin we used to share over stupid things. The private joke that said we were still on the same team. But that look had gone missing from his face for months, like somebody stole it while I was sleeping. "You're late," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to sound like a wife and not a warning. "I saved you a plate. It's cold, but I can warm it." "I already ate," he said. Wave of the hand, like my words were a fly he didn't have time to swat. Vanessa brought me something. Vanessa. That perfume name that had been following him home on his shirts, sugary and heavy and inescapable. "Your boss's daughter," I said, not an accusation, just a fact I could no longer swallow. "From the party." "Don't start," he said. I stood up slow, belly heavy, ankles sore, the baby rolling under my skin like he knew the weather was turning. "Ethan, you don't ask about the baby anymore. You don't look at me. When did we become this?" He gave me that bored look he saved for bills he didn't want to pay. "You used to be fun. Now you nag, you cry, you say you're lonely. You think that's attractive." I laughed once, small, ugly. The kind of sound a heart makes when it finds out it's been begging the wrong doorbell. "I'm 7 months pregnant. I left my job because you said we were building a family. I believed you." He stepped closer, cologne and cheap whiskey and rain on his clothes, and he said it like he was returning a shirt to a store without a receipt. Maybe I changed my mind. I could have taken the lies. I could have taken the late nights. I could have taken the new passwords and the fake meetings and the smell of a woman who wasn't me. But that casual cruelty, that shrug, that was the knife. "There's someone else," I said, not a question. He stared down at his phone like it was more important than air. "You really want the truth?" I always did. "There is someone else," he said. And she's everything you're not. You know that feeling when every sound in the room pulls back until all you can hear is whatever is breaking inside you, yeah? That happened. I hand went to my belly because my son kicked hard, like he heard it too. Ethan told me to stop crying. Of course he did. Then came the knock. I still hear it like a memory with a door. He opened it, and there she was. Vanessa red dress, like a stop sign. Hair smoothed to perfection. Smile sharpened to a point. She kissed him in my living room, in front of my baby's ultrasound picture, taped to the fridge with a magnet that said, "Grace." She walked in and said, "So this is where you used to live. Used to the kind of dagger that doesn't look like a dagger until you pull it out. What is she doing here? I asked. Because sometimes you say obvious things to test reality. She's moving in, he said, like he was announcing a pizza delivery, not a demolition. I'm his wife, I said. Because names still matter when your world is falling. Vanessa gave me that look people save for stains they wish weren't there. You were, she said soft, like mercy, which made it worse. I looked at Ethan and waited for him to say the line. Decent men say he didn't. He held the door and said, I told him I had nowhere to go. He said, not my problem. He said I always figure something out as if resilience was a permission slip to be cruel. He stood there holding the door while I grabbed the small hospital bag I'd packed weeks before, because irony is a bully that shows up even when you don't invite it. And I stepped into the rain. Vanessa tossed a plastic container of leftovers after me, like you toss scraps to a stray. You hope won't come back. It hit, popped open rice in the mud. She laughed, and he laughed too, and then he slammed the door, and the sound of that slam lived in my bones. Do you think that's fair? Would you have begged? Would you have fought? Would you have walked? Tell me, because I still ask myself that question some nights. I stood there on the porch, with the rain finding my scalp, making its way down my neck. The cold cutting my hand pressed to my back, the other on my belly. Because the cramping had started not hard yet, not exactly a pain, more like a warning the body sends when it's had enough. The neighbors were watching through curtains, and people love a show. People love a tragedy when it isn't theirs. People love to whisper. Fewer love to open a door, and I don't blame them. Not fully fear is contagious. My phone buzzed half a block from the house. I thought it might be my mother. Maybe she felt that mother tug. She always talked about the sense that your child is standing in a storm, even when you can't see the clouds. But it was Ethan, because of course it was Ethan. The text said, "Don't bother going to your mom's. I told her you ran away with another man." I wanted to throw the phone into the gutter to give the night something more to swallow. But my hands were shaking, and it slipped on its own. Landed face down in a puddle, screen flickered like a dying firefly. And then it went dark. I leaned on a lamppost, breath coming in little jerks. The kind of breathing you do when you're trying not to cry, because crying means there's no oxygen left for anything else. And that's when a car slowed, the kind of car you feel before you truly see it. Black, sleek, engine humming low. And a man stepped out with an umbrella, not close enough to threaten, close enough to cover. "Hey," he said. Voice even patient, like he'd rehearsed how to speak in a storm. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said the universal lie. "You don't look fine," he said. "You're freezing and you shouldn't be out here like this. I need to get somewhere," I said, which wasn't an answer. But it was the only truth I had on hand. "My name's Alexander," he said, not, "I'm a good guy, not let me save you just a name. Let me drive you somewhere safe. I won't leave you here." I waited for the fear to bite through whatever numbness I had left. But what I felt was relief that tasted like shame. I nodded. He held the umbrella so more rain fell on him than on me. Opened the passenger door of a car that felt like a mistake, even to sit in heat. Washed over me. He reached into the back and handed me a towel. And it was that small kindness that finally made me cry, because sometimes it's not the slam that breaks you. It's the hand that doesn't shake when it offers help. "You're not a burden," he said quick, like he'd learned to say it before someone could apologize for existing. "Everyone needs help sometimes." We drove without talk for a while, rain doing its drum solo on the windshield wipers, keeping Rhythm City lights smearing themselves across the glass like finger paint. When he finally asked where I wanted to go, I told him I couldn't go home, and I couldn't go to my mother's, and I couldn't go anywhere that required money or a plan, or a God I didn't believe in at 2 a.m. He said, "He threw you out, not a question." And I said, "Yes." And when I said he had someone else, he didn't wince. He just said, "He's wrong about you, Simple." It slid into a crack in me and stayed there like a promise. He pulled up to a building that didn't try too hard. Tall glass, warm light ivy stone. The door opened into a space that smelled like clean linen. And coffee. A housekeeper appeared in that brisk way. Good housekeepers do. And when he said, "She needs a room and dry clothes," she took charge like a nurse in a code blue. I wish I could tell you the night turned soft right then. But it didn't. My body had been carrying too much for too long. And at somewhere past 2, the pains hit the kind that grab your spine with a fist. I cried out. The housekeeper ran. Alexander came in. Barefoot, leaves, rolled up, eyes. Steady voice. Steady. "Call the doctor, get the car." And he lifted me. Like you lift something you're afraid to break. He drove like he was negotiating with the rain. Like he'd made a deal with the lights to stay green. Kept saying, "Stay with me." "Lena, breathe," and I tried. I did, but doors closed. Nurses took me. Machines. Beeped, and he was left in the hallway with his hands clenched. And that's when the doctor came out with gloves coming off, and a face I didn't want to read, and said, "She lost a lot of blood, the baby's in distress. We might lose them both." You never forget the words that decide if you get a future. They settle into your ribs and ride there for years. I woke to beeping and white light, and that specific cold of hospitals. And when I tried to speak, all that came out was the baby. And the nurse said, "You're both okay." And my body did that. Crying. That is relief and grief at the same time. He came in slow, cautious, like he didn't want to scare good news away. And when I asked, "You stayed," he laughed once, tired. "You think I'd leave you here?" And that was when I believed men like him could exist. The days after were small. The window, the bassinet, the simple food he brought. The flowers that made the room smell like outside. And when I asked him why he was doing all this, he said, "Because someone should have." And there was sadness under it that didn't invite questions, but made them grow anyway. He wouldn't let me go to a shelter when they discharged me. "You need rest," he said. "A quiet place, warm, clean." I told him I couldn't repay him, and he said, "I'm not asking you to." The house he brought me to was elegant without bragging staff that moved like a team, a garden that looked expensive, only if you knew how much patience costs rooms that glowed. I felt small there, and safe, and guilty for feeling safe. The staff were polite, not all of them kind. You can feel judgment in a room the way you can feel humidity. You learn to breathe around it. I folded laundry. I wasn't asked to fold. I watered plants. I sorted mail. I did the small domestic rituals that remind hands they are good for more than holding on. He told the staff to let me. "If it helps her feel normal," he said. And there is a difference between permission and respect. And I felt the second in how he said it. People whispered. Of course they did. Charity always looks suspicious if you've only ever seen it with strings attached. I heard 2 maids in the corridor. "She's lucky," one said. Lucky, the other laughed. "It's a trap. Men like him don't bring women home for nothing. He hasn't looked at anyone since his wife died." The first said. And I kept walking because if I stopped there, I'd never start again. But my heart pounded like someone was knocking from the inside. Wife, child, loss. Those words hung around him like an inner coat. He didn't wear grief loud. He wore it like a man who knew it on a first-name basis. We talked at night sometimes. Light talk birds that visit rosemary. How roses stab and still manage to be worth pruning a little about work. He ran a foundation. He asked if I wanted to help. You need something that isn't survival, he said. And I said yes, because I needed a reason to put on shoes that wasn't just to run. The foundation worked with women like me. Women who had been knocked down by the people who were supposed to hold them up. I answered phones. I took notes. Mostly I listened. People will hand you their pain if you make a soft place for it to land. One afternoon in the garden, kneeling in dirt, I said, I like the roses. They remind me that beauty and pain don't cancel each other out. He said, You're stronger than you think. And I shook my head. I just ran out of ways to break, and he didn't argue. He knelt down and worked beside me, and that's the language I believe in, the quiet kind. Then I found the photograph. I swear I wasn't snooping. The study door was half open. The lamp hit a frame just right. And there it was, my father in the center, arm around teenage me, and next to him, younger, but unmistakably the same man, now standing in his own house, Alexander. I picked it up because my hands didn't ask permission from my brain, and the floor creaked, and he was in the doorway. Glass in hand, face unreadable, and he said, I guess I should have locked that drawer. And I said, You knew my father? And he said, Yes, and I said, Why didn't you tell me? And he said, Because I didn't know how. Truth doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it sits down on the rug and puts its head in its hands and asks you to sit too. He told me my father mentored him. When he was starting out, taught him business with the corners uncut, taught him patience, taught him that ethics are heavy, but worth carrying. When my father died, he promised he'd look out for me, but he lost track of me, and by the time he found a trail, I was married to Ethan. Letters went unanswered. Calls, dead-end doors closed. Your husband told me you didn't want anyone from your father's old world contacting you, he said. And shame threaded through his voice like wire. I believed him. I shouldn't have. I held that photo so tight the edges dug into my palm. He took you from me too, I said. And I didn't mean it in a romantic movie way. I meant it in the practical way. Grief steals warehouses of small things you never get back. Pattern interrupt because I need you fully here for this next part. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. The gate buzzer rang one night when the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to storm or sleep. Mrs. Gray's voice, the housekeeper's voice, that had become safety to me, floated up the stairs, sir. Someone's here, asking for Miss Lena. Alexander told me to stay upstairs. I didn't. Habit, curiosity, defiance. I don't know, maybe all three. He opened the door, and there was Ethan. Not the same peacock in expensive shoes, a man eroded by his own lies, soaked through eyes hollow, that shaky smile, abuser's practice in mirrors. The one that says, maybe you'll rescue me so I don't have to change. Lena, he said, aiming for tenderness, and hitting nowhere close. I need to talk to you. You need to leave, Alexander said, stepping between us, and I felt my ribs rearrange themselves around that protective shape. Ethan smirked because bravado is a habit. Still playing the hero. Thought you'd be taller. He held out an envelope, and when I didn't move, he dropped it on the table like a dealer sliding cards. Contract stamped official, my father's name beside Alexander's company seal words. I didn't fully understand, but recognized from a life I'd almost had. That contract ruined him, Ethan said. Your father trusted this man, thought he was getting help, and instead he got crushed. You think this guy saved you. He destroyed your family. I looked at Alexander and waited for the clean denial. The strong no, but he stayed silent a second too long. And silence can sound like guilt if you're already hurt. Tell me it isn't true, I said. Yeah, there was begging in it. I hate that. But I'm telling you the truth. It isn't the whole story, he said. Ethan laughed that dry laugh. Men laugh when they think they've won. There's always an explanation for men like you. A cleanup crew for your conscience, and I did the thing. Trauma teaches you too well. I ran, up the stairs with the papers like ghosts in my hands, into the room that felt more mine than any place had in months, because distance feels like safety when you're drowning. Alexander came up later and sat across from me like a confessional that didn't require kneeling. Your father's company was failing because the local council cut payments and played dirty, he said. He came to me for help. I backed him to keep him afloat. But there was a young employee he trusted. Smart, ambitious. Charming, had access to the accounts. He forged documents, created transfers, stole money from both of us. He paused, eyes steady on mine, not flinching. That employee was Ethan. My body went cold, then hot, then hollow. No, I said, because sometimes you need a second to believe the thing that matches the ache you've been ignoring. He killed my father with his lies, and I married him. It tasted like blood in my mouth, even though I wasn't bleeding. I didn't know it was him, Alexander said. Not until tonight. He disappeared after your father died. I spent years trying to find the fingerprints on the forgery, and when I saw his face under my porch light, I knew. We sat with it. That quiet after a bomb, where you count your fingers, your breaths, your reasons. Then I asked the only question that mattered. What do we do now? And he said, we finish it, and there was a steel in his voice that let me borrow some of mine back. The plan was not cinematic in the way movies think plans are. It was simple because truth likes simple. Every year, the foundation hosted a gala cameras donors, speeches 100 faces that love to clap, and it drew men like Ethan, the way sugar draws ants. Alexander reached out with that reasonable tone men use when they want to make other men feel smart. You should come. Lena wants to talk, and pride did the rest. Pride is a leash you don't see until it tightens. The ballroom glittered like it owed someone money. Crystal light polished floors gowns that whispered when their owners walked, the kind of staged generosity that makes people feel holy for one evening. I wore a dark dress that didn't make a scene, but didn't apologize, and my son slept at home with a nanny who hummed hymns to keep bad dreams away. Alexander placed small cameras in centerpieces and a mic on a donor with a trustworthy smile and questions designed to land softly on a confession. Ethan walked in with the old swagger, ironed and starched, the storm on the porch, filed under bad day eyes, scanning until he found me. Smirk in place. He started drinking because bragging dries out the mouth. The donor slid in close, voice like a secret, asked about my father. Mr. Harris asked about deals gone wrong, how the old man never saw it coming. And Ethan leaned in with the confidence of a man who thinks secrets are currency, and he's the only one with a wallet. Old man died thinking he lost everything because of a deal, he said. Poor fool never found out the truth. I emptied his accounts. He trusted me. That's on him. He laughed. There are laughs that echo. His did. The mic caught every syllable. The cameras caught the face he made when he said it. And that matters, because some truths need a face to stick. Alexander didn't kill the lights and raise a spotlight. He did it the quiet way. The careful way. The audio hit the right inboxes. The footage went live to the people who actually do real work when crimes meet recordings. and phones lit up across the ballroom like a field. Remembering it was full of fireflies. Reporters outside smelled the blood in the water. Partners texted, creditors called. And then you heard it. The sirens not loud at first, then clear, and the room went still. The way rooms go, still. When Consequence walks in, wearing a uniform, he said, "Mistake." He said, "Mix-up." He said, "You can't do this here." And I stepped forward. Not big, not dramatic, just enough that he had to look me in the eyes. "You finally get to live with the truth you built for everyone else," I said. And my voice didn't shake. He said my name like it was a key, but the locks had been changed. The cuffs clicked. Cameras flashed. Some stories need light to end. After the world didn't explode, it exhaled. Headlines did their hungry dance for a couple weeks, then moved on to the next fire. But the freedom stayed. And that's the point the cameras leave. But the quiet remains the quiet, where you realize you slept through a night without a nightmare for the first time in months. I stood on a stage at a women's conference, later my son on my hip. Because he belongs in every room my story does. And I told the truth clean. I was thrown out with nothing but pain and a heartbeat, I said. I thought I lost everything. But I found truth, dignity, and a peace I didn't know was possible. Sometimes God doesn't punish you by taking things away. He saves you by removing what was destroying you. The room stood up. I didn't cry until after, when nobody needed me to be a flag. A letter came from the prison, because endings like to test you, like to ask if you meant what you said. It was from Ethan. "You won, Alex," it said. She never looked at me the way she looked at you. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I did it." Not anything that sounded like a soul trying to grow just a scoreboard. I held the letter over the fire until the paper curled and blackened ash, lifting like tiny ghosts finally given permission to leave. "Nothing worth keeping," I said, when Alexander asked what it was, and I meant it. He stood by the crib where my daughter slept. Tiny hand curled, like she was holding the edge of the future, and he asked, "What will you tell her when she grows up?" And I said, that her father's sins made me strong, but her mother's courage made her free, and the fire talked softly, while the house finally felt like home. Not because of the walls, because of the truth we'd let live inside them. Now I know what some of you are thinking. The billionaire saved. You must be nice. Must be a fairy tale. Let me complicate that. Power is complicated. Money opens doors, and it also makes people go quiet. It buys lawyers who don't blink, and it can wrap guilt in good deeds and call it redemption. But it also paid hospital bills and bought time and kept a roof over a child who hadn't asked for any of this. Do you think it's possible to accept help without selling your soul? Do you think charity can be clean if the person giving it remembers where he came from? Be honest. Another truth. A harder one. The person you share a bed with can be a stranger for years, and the person you think is a stranger can be the one who knew you when your father bragged about your science fair ribbons. Which one do you trust, history or story? I chose the one who didn't need me to shrink for his comfort. That was my line. You get to draw yours. Did I forgive Ethan? Depends what you mean. I stopped waking up imagining grabbing him by the throat and getting back what he stole, because revenge is a kind of prison too, and I was done with cages. I didn't open the door to his, though I didn't post bail for the person who set the house on fire and then complained about the heat. Forgiveness and consequences can share a room, do you agree? Or do you think that's soft? I kept working at the foundation. Watched women walk in, carrying their lives in one bag. watched them walk out with a plan and a phone that wasn't monitored, and a face that looked like someone who remembered her own name. We helped them find lawyers who speak human. We set up bank accounts abusers can't find. We called shelters, and we called mothers, and sometimes we called judges. And the thing I learned is that a system that let my husband throw me out in the rain laughs every day when nobody is looking. You want controversy? Here's one. The bystanders. Neighbors looked out their windows that night, and they watched. They didn't step outside. And I get it. Fear is real. But so is responsibility. If you were them, would you have opened a door? Would you have pretended you didn't hear? Tell me the truth. Sometimes at night, when the dishwasher hums and the garden smells like rain, we sit in the kitchen with mugs we don't need and talk. Not like a movie, not like a fairy tale that wants a bow. Like two people who survived and are learning what calm feels like without bracing for the next slap. People ask if we're together. They want a kiss. In the last scene, they want a wedding. They want a ring to justify everything. But life isn't a bow. It's a knot you work at with steady fingers, and we're working slowly, honestly, with the ghosts watching and the future not demanding a deadline. I think about the roses a lot the first time I pruned them. I bled thorn caught the soft inside of my finger. I hissed and laughed at myself because the scarlet was so bright against my palm. He handed me a bandage without comment. They teach you where to hold them, he said. You don't stop pruning because roses can hurt you. Learn a better grip. Maybe that's love, not the version on magazine covers, the version that brings you a bandage without making a speech. You want another pattern? Interrupt, here's a quick one. If you were me on that porch. Belly, heavy rain in your hair, would you have gotten into that car? Honestly, if you were. Alexander, would you have stopped? If you were Ethan at the gala and the cuffs came out, would you have looked me in the eye or looked at the floor, tell me? Because where you look says everything. People ask about my mother. We talk now, but we had to scrape the mold off the years. Lies are humidity. They get in the corners of old houses, and they make everything smell wrong. She believed him when he said I ran off with another man, because he said it with the kind of confidence people mistake for truth. Confidence is not truth. She knows that now. We hold my daughter and tell stories about my father, how he whistled out of tune, how he taught me to check a contract twice and then a third time for whatever might not be there. He would have liked Alexander. That sentence took me longer to say out loud than you might expect, because saying it meant forgiving myself for believing the wrong man. There are nights when rain silvers the garden, and I stand by the window, and the house goes quiet in that holy way. Good houses do. And I think about the knock. I think about the slam. I think about the text that cut me loose from my mother's door. And I think about an umbrella and the space a stranger made for me under it. I don't tell you this to make him a saint. I tell you because that is the picture I carry. The one where both of us are a little wet, and both of us are a little scared, and both of us decided to move anyway. So here is your controversy, your comment section. Invitation, your moral knot to work with me. Does money clean kindness or contaminate it? Are we too fast to condemn people with power to always be wrong? And are we too slow to call out the small cruelties of ordinary men who don't have wealth but do have women to hurt? What is justice? A courtroom? A pair of handcuffs? A video going viral? Or is it a mother sleeping through the night without flinching when a car door slams down the block? If it were you, what would justice feel like in your hands? I didn't get a clean slate. Nobody does. You get a slate. Someone scrubbed hard and under certain light you can still see the old words faint, like the outline of a map. You don't travel anymore. Healing is writing over it, without pretending it was never there. My script is messy. It uses commas and dashes, and sometimes it runs on, because that's how a heart talks when it's finally allowed to. And if that bothers you, I hope you never need to talk like this. I'm going to end the way I live now with the truth sturdy and simple. I chose justice over revenge. I chose to accept help without handing over my soul. I chose to become the woman I needed the night a man told me to get out and called me a problem. And I chose to keep the window cracked even when it rains, because fresh air matters more than the floors staying clean. You can disagree, you can argue, but don't tell me to be quiet. I was quiet for too long. Now it's your turn. Do you think I owed Ethan forgiveness without consequence? Do you believe Alexander's help was clean? Or do you see strings? I didn't see. Do you blame the neighbors for watching through glass? Or do you understand their fear? Tell me. If it were you, what would you have done? Where would you have gone? Would you have stepped into that car? Would you have opened your door? Drop your thoughts below. Argue with me. Agree with me. Tell me a story. If it's safe, teach somebody who's still standing in the rain that there are umbrellas. And yes, sometimes, they look like people you didn't expect. Like this video. If you believe justice matters more than appearances, share it with the one friend who needs to hear that storms end, and subscribe. If you want more stories told by people who lived them, scars and all. I'm Lena. I made it through the rain, and I'm still learning where to hold the roses.